My name is Jacqueline, and I seriously appreciate it so much for you clicking on today's video. We are going to be discussing accommodations, and any sort of disability has a common factor of accommodations. And it just, hopefully, people do accommodate the specific person who has the disability. Today I'm just going to be discussing my own educational journey with having dyslexia and dyscalculia, which are two learning disabilities, and discussing my accommodations list with you all. Some of these accommodations I use all the time, some I don't use that often, but it's still really nice to have them available if, for whatever reason, I do decide one day that one of them would be really helpful for me in that moment. If you are wondering what even is an accommodation, that is something that I'm about to answer with a little snippet from the University of Washington, a little quote, if you will, because it's actually what that is. It says, the term accommodation may be used to describe an alteration of environment, curriculum format, or equipment that allows an individual with a disability to gain access or content and/or complete assigned tasks. They allow students with disabilities to pursue a regular course of study. Essentially, there's just something that is put in place to help the disabled student access the regular course of study, just like their counterparts without disabilities. If we're talking about a school setting, accommodations show up in IEP plans and 504 plans. So that's something to just be aware of, especially when it comes to learning disabilities. But again, there are all sorts of disabilities that go into an IEP and or a 504 plan. Another term you might hear is a modification, and let me tell you what that is. A modification changes what a student is being taught or is expected to learn. So some student who has dyslexia, if you will, may have a shortened writing assignment than their counterpart without dyslexia. So what's different with a modification versus an accommodation is accommodations, they are expected to do the same exact thing as their peers. Modification means they are not expected to do what their peers are doing at that given moment. I'm going to be reading off my laptop some of the accommodations that I have on my IEP plan for assessments, testing, and grading. Number 1, provide completed study guides and a checklist of specific topics on upcoming assessments. I 100% utilize the accommodation for getting study guides. A lot of teachers just give study guides out to everyone. Sometimes I feel like there's been limited times where I'm the only one who gets a certain study guide, so that's just kind of universal for my school personally, but it's really helpful to have. Next one, provide copies of notes to follow along, highlight, or compare her own work before class. I get filled in notes and or copies of notes from my teachers, and it is so beneficial. I utilize this accommodation probably every single day, to be honest with you, because my classes right now are very notes heavy, and it's just really helpful. It helps me because I do not have to listen and write at the same time. That's my downfall. Doing two things at once is really complicated for me to do and do accurately, so that's where these copies of notes comes in handy, because I can just sit at a desk and listen and absorb the information without having to do the task of also writing it down. Next up, provide word blanks or utilize multiple choice tests to support working memory. I haven't used this accommodation that often. Maybe once in a blue moon it has occurred, but definitely not that I can think of off the top of my head, but it's still really nice that this is something on my accommodations list if I ever need it. Next up is provide formula card to utilize on assessments. What this means is that it's generally like a math card, so there's a lot of math formulas out there. It's something like y equals mx plus b, which is the formula for finding slope. Again, a lot of my math teachers, thankfully, have put their formula card on the test already, so I haven't had to need to ask for this. But if that weren't the case, this would be something that I would use all the time, because there is so much information that you have to remember for different math terminologies and math formulas. Limit annotation tasks to 50%. So basically, I'm expected to do half of what the other kids are doing, and I haven't done this too often, but I do get very lengthy assignments. However, why they get done is because I have a helper in school. It's a part of my IEP plan. It's called Specially Designed Instruction, and this person helps me with my writing and math assignments, and that's why some of the complicated things that I get in my honors humanities class will be done in time, because I'm getting extra help at school. So if that weren't the case for me, this would be something I would definitely utilize a lot, and I assume I would also utilize this in college quite often because I'm expecting there to be a lot of long reading assignments that are coming my way. Am I prepared to think about that? No. Anyways, moving on. Allow oral responses on exams if longer than one paragraph is expected. So essentially, if there is something that needs to be written down, I can verbally say it to the teacher or a helper in the classroom. I think I've done this maybe once or twice in my high school career. I'm currently a senior, so that means I do not use this often. I feel like this is really helpful for a lot of other students to just be aware of that this is something you can do. I think sophomore year was when this was introduced to me. I did not know that there was something where you could just verbally say answers to the teacher instead of writing it down. So I like that it's a thing, and you guys should be aware of it if you are also wanting to understand more accommodations. The next section on my accommodations list is reading assignments, and it has allow the use of audiobooks. This is such a great accommodation to have, especially for those of you who may have learning disabilities out there, more specifically that would tie into dyslexia. I love this accommodation. I love that it's on here. My school has a subscription to something called Learning Ally, which is an audiobook program that was actually specifically designed for dyslexic students. It has been really, really helpful for me, especially early on in my high school career. I haven't really done it these past few years because I had a lot of tutoring, which I mentioned in my last video. I can now finally read a book and understand it by myself, so I've tried to push myself to do that. However, I still use audiobooks. I'm reading a book currently that is on Audible. The next thing is under the category of presentation of material and subject, and it says limit copying tasks due to visual deficits. This accommodation has helped me a lot, and this ties into my filled-in notes that I received too, because people who have dyslexia in particular have tracking difficulties, so looking up at a whiteboard or a chalkboard that has a lot of information on it and looking back down at your page, it can be really hard, the motion of looking up and down, and you can lose track of your place on your page or on the board in front of you. So this is why this is an accommodation that a lot of people have, and I could not say more positive things about it. Please, if you do have dyslexia or reading difficulties and you do have accommodations or want to have accommodations, this is something to be aware of and tuck in your brain to remember. We're on a roll because I have yet another accommodation that I love on my accommodations list, which is under the reading assessments category. And it says, allow her to opt out of reading aloud if uncomfortable. Now, when I was a freshman and sophomore, I was very terrified to read in front of my classmates. Then I got some tutoring over the summertime, and my reading fluency and reading accuracy grew, and I felt more comfortable whenever there'd be cold calls or just volunteers to read in front of my peers. So I have become more willing to do that over the years. However, at the beginning, I was terrified. And this, might I just pause real quickly, is why I hate, and a lot of people who have dyslexia or reading challenges hate cold calls and popcorn reading, because it's just so unnecessary and adds so much stress to those in the classroom who have reading challenges. So if you're a teacher out there, please don't do that. It's the worst thing ever for us dyslexics over here. Under the topic of other, we have do not penalize or penalize Jacqueline for her spelling errors on assessments if she is doing a pen and paper assessment. To be honest with you, a lot of my teachers at my school have just not penalized or taken away any points for any students if they spell things incorrectly. However, this is just really nice to have solidified as an accommodation. If any teachers were to take away points because I spelled something incorrectly, I can show them this and be like, hey, you need to add points back on because this is an accommodation of mine. And can I just say, this should be universal because English is hard, spelling is really tricky sometimes, but I don't think it's necessary to take off points for spelling difficulties, punctuation errors, or anything like that, as long as we're trying, okay? Because that's all that matters. Under the category of other, allow access to digital versions of math textbooks. Again, I'm in prep math classes, which means I'm on the lowest math class possible. And these math teachers are really nice over the years for allowing all students to have math textbooks online. Under the category of other, we have allow access to voice to text, which is pretty self-explanatory. I've used that a handful of times. It's really nice to have. Also, for tests and assignments, I get time and a half, and I love it so much. I really do. I've used it a handful of times. I'm usually very punctual with my assignments, but it's nice to have in the back of my mind if I can't complete it on time, I get time and a half and can spend a little less time stressing over the due date. So I think that goes for really anyone who's looking for accommodations, add that one. For district-wide assessments, let's go through this. In-school site other than regular classroom. So yeah, if there's ever a time where I'm taking a test and I don't want to be in that certain classroom, that means I get to go into a different classroom with peace and quiet. Time extended beyond standard administration, but it has to be for the same exact day. I've used this one, especially for midterms. Using a human reader, but it is not allowed to read the passages for you. I think I've used this a few times in high school. Using a scribe or recording device, but it is not allowed for the writing sections of the specific assessments that I'm taking. And again, I don't believe that I've used that often. Allow use of multiple or frequent breaks. I don't really use that one. Lastly, I just want to go through a couple of ones that I don't personally have, but people have recommended it online, and I know of them as well. So let's run through it. Large print, repetition of instructions, the use of a calculator. I need to add that one to my own accommodations list for sure. Provide preferential seating, so like wherever you want to choose to sit, you can have that. Reduce number of items on a page. Again, sometimes pages are just too cluttered, so if it needs to be broken up into certain chunks, then go for it. I think that's great that that's an accommodation to have. Provide a designated reader for presentations or tests. Sometimes people are uncomfortable speaking in front of large audiences, so that is why a helper would help you read that. And then the use of a spell check program. Here's just a couple other things that I want to talk to you before I close out this video. Number one, if you do have accommodations, whether that's a 504 plan, IEP plan, please carry around the copy of your accommodations list with you, especially in school or even at work or in college. It's nice to have that tangible and you can always refer to it. The other thing I want to say is if you do have an IEP plan, you will have someone called a case manager look over your IEP plan and make sure that teachers are following your IEP strictly. That means they are following your accommodations. So if for whatever reason, this happens a lot more than you may think. Teachers don't want to accommodate you, or teachers forget to accommodate you. You don't need to go to the teacher first if you don't want to. You can go to your case manager and ask your case manager to help you out, get this teacher to accommodate you. Just know that you are so valid if you have accommodations. It doesn't mean that you are any less than your peers. It just means you need some extra support, and that is fabulous. Get your extra support when you can. Well, that has been all for today's video. If you like this type of content about learning disabilities, please subscribe to my YouTube channel down below. I also have a TikTok account called Jacqueline_Elise. Another thing I forgot to mention, I have a website called mindslikemine.com. It has my own disability story on there and some helpful resources. So please go take a look at that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. I hope that it made you feel a little bit less alone. If you too have accommodations or if you're looking into getting accommodations, refer back to this video. Make sure you know some of these key ones that I mentioned before. And I hope to see you on the next video. Bye, you guys.